It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric. We have to stop treating our opponents as our enemies. They are not our enemies. They are Americans.
That made everyone feel kind of warm and fuzzy. Well, what did Biden sound like today?
Something dangerous happening in America now. There's an extremist movement that does not share the basic beliefs in our democracy. The MAGA movement. There's no question that today's Republican Party is driven and intimidated by MAGA Republican extremists. Their extreme agenda, if carried out, would fundamentally alter the institutions of American democracy as we know it.
The only thing that was missing is what he had last year, that real weird red light background. I mean, the finger's always pointed back at Democrats when they accuse conservatives of being this or that. It's what they actually are. And right now, yeah, the threat to democracy is coming from people trying to lock up the guy who's leading in the polls in the opposition party. So they don't want to empower the people, but they do fear the people. And they're going to smear the people and lie about us to seize more power for themselves. That's the great danger in a second Biden term. Joining me now, Ned Ryun, founder and CEO of American Majority, and Ben Domenech, Fox News contributor and editor-at-large of The Spectator. Ned, this really did feel like it was a redo of his Independence Hall speech a year ago, which didn't work then. But they seem to be going back to the drawing board.
I mean, nothing says bipartisanship when the President of the United States tries to demonize half the electorate. And Laura, I got to tell you, for any normal, rational, clear-thinking human being in America, it should be deeply troubling that the President of the United States is trying to demonize tens of millions of people, but not only demonize them, dehumanize them. And I think you don't even have to be a close student of history to understand that those with authoritarian tendencies use this rhetoric to try and dehumanize and turn these people into subhumans. And once they can do that, and these people, the percentage of the population is seen as subhuman, you can do to them whatever you want. And that's deeply troubling. And I think the left's authoritarian tendencies, their language, their behavior, that's an existential threat to Americans' way of life and their freedom. And the other thing that was very troubling to me, it's not America First trying to destroy American democracy. We're not the ones trying to censor free speech or the free flow of information. We're not trying to censor anyone. We're not trying to use the legal system as a weapon against our political opponents over policy differences. That would be Joe Biden and the left, and their definition of democracy has absolutely nothing to do with true representative democracy, and that's very apparent from what Joe Biden said today.
Well, Ben, when I'm listening to Biden today, and I'm thinking he's essentially saying that if he doesn't win, and his people wrote this, he's just reading the lines, I'm sure he doesn't even understand it at this point, but he said if he doesn't win, then America is essentially a rogue nation. That's quite the message to the rest of the world at a very dangerous time for the world.
Even the energy in those two clips that you just showed, Laura, was very different. You know, one of them, he seemed like he was struggling to kind of read off of the teleprompter in front of him. You know, the other, he seemed to be far more, attuned to what was going on. And I think that's kind of an indication of the decline that we're witnessing as a nation, in this president who is just, holding on to power, grasping it, white-knuckling it to the end, without any kind of regard for the fact that he no longer has the ability to function as our commander-in-chief in any real way. Look, I found this to be a completely, depressing, objectionable speech. The kind of things, the demonization that he is engaged in of a significant portion of America, essentially half of Americans, it's totally at odds with the kind of things that he promised when he was running for the presidency the first time. And it's consistent with the kind of partisan demagoguery that we have seen from this White House, which just seeks out, to find people to blame for all the problems that are at hand, as opposed to engaging with their own flaws, their own flaws of Bidenomics, their own flaws of inflation and everything that it's done to people's pocketbooks. They just won't engage with it. They won't address it as being honest, and instead they're engaged in this complete fantasy world where they are always the heroes and everyone else is to blame for the problems at hand.
Yeah, I think Biden and his team would much rather deal with the CCP on pretty much any issue than ever deal with any of the conservatives on the Hill. I mean, they don't want to do, the conservatives are, they're kind of, as Ned said, subhuman, but China you can work with. That's a twisted outlook. All right, Ned, Trump was speaking to the UAW members, very smart yesterday, trying to, again, solidify the working class base. He wisely brought up Biden's EV mandate and what it will do to the auto industry. Check this out.
For auto workers, Biden's forced transition is a transition to hell. If your union leaders will not demand that Crooked Joe repeal his electric vehicle mandate immediately, then it doesn't matter what hourly wage you get. It just doesn't make a damn bit of difference, because in 2 to 3 years, you will not have one job in this state.
Yeah, Ned, it doesn't matter what you get in these negotiations. Your jobs are going to be toast, especially with the encroaching China threat with the EV industry and manufacturing.
Well, exactly, Laura. I mean, it's not a coincidence that the Biden White House is so charitable and dovish towards China, especially on this electric vehicle and solar panel, solar power, which would all basically give a lot of power over the electric vehicle and green energy business to China. It would make us heavily reliant upon them. I mean, it really is, if you want to look at this in a much broader picture beyond electric vehicles and all this, it's a national security issue. If you're going to actually take these parts of our manufacturing and give it over to China, significant portions of our life, and really let them truly control it, I think you're endangering a lot of our way of life, our jobs, our manufacturing, but also giving China a lot of power over which direction this country is going to take. Not a shock at all from Biden's White House doing this.
Ben, before we go, Biden was at this event in Arizona, I guess, to honor Senator John McCain by building a library in Senator McCain's name. Now, I know this is personal to you and obviously to your wife, but what can you tell us about this?
What I can tell you, Laura, is that the idea that you would take COVID relief funds and use that to build a library for Senator McCain would be an extremely insulting thing to Senator McCain, someone who, regardless of your opinion of his, perspective on foreign policy, his ideology on, any number of things, was emphatic as a fiscal conservative, an opponent of earmarks, and a believer that you should not have pork spending and slush funds. The idea that you would take money from a COVID relief fund in order to create a library is ridiculous. You could absolutely have raised this money from his former donors. I was talking to Senator Lindsey Graham earlier today about this very point. It's something that could have been done, and instead Joe Biden parachutes in and wants to get the plaudits from the New York Times and others for being a defender of democracy by doing something like this with a ridiculous source for the funding involved. It's absolutely abhorrent. I hope that some folks in the Senate who actually have fiscally conservative principles will claw this money back. It should not go to something like this. And John McCain would not be in favor of it. Neither am I. Neither is my wife, Megan. And I'm sure that many supporters of him who respect him for the fight that he had over pork spending would be in that same position as well.
All right. Very interesting. We'll be following that as well. Ned and Ben, thanks so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.